Linda's cafe was a bustling hub in the heart of the city. The smell of freshly ground coffee beans and baked goods filled the air as Linda moved swiftly behind the counter. She had owned this place for over a decade, and it had become a second home to many regulars. However, today was different. The usual warmth Linda exuded was replaced by a palpable tension. As she prepared a complex order for a demanding customer, Linda felt the weight of her responsibilities bearing down on her. The past few weeks had been particularly challenging. A pipe burst in the kitchen had led to unexpected expenses, and one of her longtime employees had quit without notice. Linda was understaffed, overworked, and struggling to keep up with the daily demands of running her business. She glanced at the clock, realizing she had been on her feet for over 8 hours without a break. The cafe was fuller than usual, with nearly every table occupied. Linda's eyes darted from table to table, mentally calculating how long each customer had been there and how much they had ordered. It was then that Angela walked in, holding her son Malik's hand. Linda had seen them before. They weren't regulars, but they had visited a few times in the past month. Angela looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes betraying a lack of sleep. Malik, an energetic boy of about 5, bounced alongside her, chattering excitedly. Linda watched as they settled into a corner table, Angela slumping into her chair while Malik climbed onto his seat. They ordered only one coffee and a small pastry to share. As the minutes ticked by, Linda found herself growing increasingly agitated. The table Angela and Malik occupied could seat 4, and there were customers waiting for a place to sit. An hour passed and Angela and Malik showed no signs of leaving. Malik had spread out some coloring books and toys on the table, while Angela nursed her now cold coffee, staring blankly at her phone. Linda's frustration peaked as she saw a group of 4 potential customers leave after finding nowhere to sit. In a moment of impulsivity fueled by stress and fatigue, Linda approached Angela's table. Her usual customer service smile was nowhere to be seen as she addressed Angela. "Excuse me," Linda said, her voice tight with barely contained irritation. "I'm going to have to ask you and your son to leave. We have a policy about table time, and you've been here for over an hour with just one purchase." Angela looked up, surprise and confusion evident on her face. "I'm sorry, what? We've never been told about any policy before." Linda's patience snapped. "Well, I'm telling you now. This isn't a daycare or a playground. If you're not actively eating or drinking, you need to make room for paying customers." As soon as the words left her mouth, Linda knew she had crossed a line. The cafe fell silent, other customers staring in shock. Angela's face hardened, a mix of hurt and anger replacing her initial confusion. "I see," Angela said coldly, gathering Malik's things. "Come on, baby. We're not welcome here." As they left, Linda felt a wave of shame wash over her. She had never spoken to a customer like that before. The stress and frustration had gotten the better of her, and she had taken it out on a tired mother and her child. As she watched Angela and Malik walk away through the cafe window, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. As Angela and Malik left the cafe, a tense silence hung in the air. Unbeknownst to Linda, a customer named James had been recording the entire interaction on his smartphone. James, a freelance journalist with a keen eye for controversial stories, sensed that this incident could generate significant attention. Without hesitation, James edited the video slightly, trimming it to highlight the most inflammatory parts of Linda's outburst. He added a provocative caption: "Local cafe owner discriminates against black mother and child, while racism, one cafe gate." Within minutes, he posted the video on various social media platforms. The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times across multiple platforms. Local community groups picked it up, and soon it caught the attention of larger national accounts focused on social justice issues. The hashtag #JoasCafeGate began trending in their city. As the video circulated, viewers reacted with shock and outrage. Comments flooded in, many condemning Linda's actions and calling for a boycott of her cafe. Some local influencers shared the video, adding their own commentary about systemic racism and the importance of supporting Black-owned businesses instead. Meanwhile, Linda was oblivious to the storm brewing online. It wasn't until later that evening, as she was closing up the cafe, that her phone began buzzing incessantly with notifications. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was just a group chat gone wild. But as the notifications continued, she decided to check. Linda's heart sank as she opened her social media accounts. Her personal page and the cafe's business page were flooded with angry messages. Some were from longtime customers expressing their disappointment and vowing never to return. Others were from strangers, hurling accusations of racism and demanding she close her business. Confused and panicked, Linda scrolled through the comments until she found a link to the video. As she watched herself on screen, her face paled. The recording captured her words clearly, but it didn't show the hours of stress leading up to that moment. Taken out of context, her actions seemed far more malicious than she had intended. Linda's phone rang. It was her sister, Michelle. "Linda, what's going on? I just saw a video of you yelling at a Black woman and her kid. Tell me it's not what it looks like." I don't know what to say," Linda stammered. "It wasn't like that. I was stressed and they had been there for so long." "Linda, do you realize how bad this looks?" Michelle's voice was a mix of concern and disappointment. "You need to address this immediately." As the night wore on, more calls and messages poured in. Friends, family, and even a few loyal customers reached out, some offering support, others demanding explanations. Linda felt overwhelmed, unsure of how to respond or what to do next. The reality of the situation began to sink in. In a single moment of frustration, she had not only hurt Angela and Malik, but also potentially destroyed the reputation of the business she had spent years building. The cafe that had been her pride and joy was now being labeled as a hub of discrimination. Linda barely slept that night, her mind racing with the potential consequences of her actions. She knew she needed to respond, to explain, to apologize, but the sheer scale of the backlash paralyzed her. As dawn broke, she realized that the cafe she would open today would be fundamentally different from the one she had closed yesterday. The incident had changed everything, and she was utterly unprepared for what was to come. Angela sat on her couch staring at her phone in disbelief. The video of her encounter with Linda at the cafe had gone viral, and her social media feeds were flooded with messages of support, outrage, and calls for action. She hadn't intended for this to become a public spectacle, but now that it had, she felt a responsibility to speak out. With trembling fingers, Angela began to type out her story. She described how she had been a regular at the cafe, often bringing Malik there for a treat after his doctor's appointments. She explained the exhaustion of being a single mother, working long hours as a nurse, and how the cafe had been a rare moment of respite in her hectic life. Angela's words were raw and honest, detailing the hurt and humiliation she felt when Linda confronted her. As she hit post, Angela felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Within minutes, her post began to gain traction. People from all over the city and even beyond began to share their own experiences of discrimination. Angela's inbox filled with messages from other mothers, particularly women of color, who resonated with her story. Inspired by the outpouring of support, Angela decided to take action. She reached out to some of the mothers who had contacted her, proposing the idea of forming a support group. The response was overwhelming. Within days, Angela had organized an online meeting with a dozen other mothers from diverse backgrounds. During their first video call, emotions ran high as each woman shared her experiences. They discussed the subtle and not-so-subtle forms of racism they encountered daily, from suspicious glances in stores to outright confrontations like Angela's. As they talked, a sense of solidarity grew among them. One of the mothers, Tanya, suggested they turn their group into something more formal. "We need to educate people," she said. "Our experiences aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a bigger problem." Angela nodded, feeling a sense of purpose growing within her. "You're right. We can use what happened to me as a starting point for a larger conversation about racism and inequality in our community." The group decided to create a social media campaign, sharing their stories and inviting others to do the same. They used the hashtag #SmoreThanAMoment, emphasizing that the incident at the cafe was just one example of a pervasive issue. As Angela became more involved in this newfound activism, she noticed changes in Malik. The usually cheerful boy had become quieter, often looking at her with worried eyes. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Malik finally spoke up. "Mummy, why was that lady mean to us at the coffee place?" he asked, his voice small and confused. Angela's heart ached. She had hoped to shield Malik from the harsh realities of racism for a little longer, but she realized that wasn't possible anymore. Taking a deep breath, she pulled him close. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people can be unkind because they don't understand others who look different from them," she explained gently. "But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. We're perfect just the way we are." Malik nodded slowly, processing her words. "Is that why you're talking to all those other mummies on the computer?" Angela smiled, touched by his perceptiveness. "Yes, baby. We're trying to help people understand each other better, so nobody has to feel the way we did that day." As she held Malik, Angela felt a renewed sense of determination. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating a better world for her son and all the children who might face similar experiences. The support group continued to grow, and Angela found herself at the center of a burgeoning movement. Local news outlets began reaching out for interviews, and community leaders expressed interest in working with the group to address systemic issues. Angela knew the road ahead would be challenging. She was stepping into a role she never expected, balancing her job, single motherhood, and now activism. But as she looked at Malik, peacefully falling asleep in her arms, she knew it was worth it. The incident at the cafe had been painful, but it had also awakened something in her, a determination to fight for change, not just for herself, but for her son and for all those who had been silenced for too long. Linda sat in the back row of the community center, her heart racing as she scanned the room filled with concerned citizens. The town hall meeting had been hastily organized in response to the incident at her cafe, and Linda had been strongly encouraged to attend by her lawyer and the local business association. As the meeting began, Linda listened to speaker after speaker recount personal experiences of discrimination. Some shared stories of being followed in stores, others of being passed over for promotions, and a few of confrontations eerily similar to what had happened in her cafe. With each account, Linda felt increasingly uncomfortable, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. Midway through the meeting, a man named David took the podium. Unlike the previous speakers, David's tone was measured and analytical. He presented statistics on racial disparities in their community, from employment rates to housing access. Linda found herself captivated by his presentation, realizing how much she had been unaware of. After the meeting, as people milled about discussing what they'd heard, David approached Linda. "You're the cafe owner, aren't you?" he asked, his voice neutral. Linda nodded, bracing herself for another verbal attack. But David surprised her. "I'm glad you came," he said. "It's important for everyone to be part of this conversation." Relieved by his non-confrontational approach, Linda found herself opening up. "I never thought of myself as prejudiced," she admitted. "But after hearing all these stories, I'm starting to question a lot of things." David nodded understandingly. "That's a good start," he said. "Recognizing our biases is the first step to addressing them. Would you be open to talking more about this?" Over the next few weeks, Linda met with David several times. As a local activist and diversity consultant, he helped her unpack her actions and the underlying biases that might have influenced them. Their conversations were often uncomfortable, forcing Linda to confront aspects of herself she had never examined before. During one particularly intense session, David asked Linda to recall times in her life when she might have benefited from white privilege. At first, Linda struggled to come up with examples. insisting that she had worked hard for everything she had. But as David gently prodded, memories began to surface. Times when she had been given the benefit of the doubt in situations where others might not have been. Opportunities that had come easily to her, but might have been out of reach for others. "It's not about diminishing your achievements, Linda," David explained. "It's about recognizing that the playing field isn't level for everyone." As Linda's understanding grew, she began to see her cafe, and her role as its owner, in a new light. She realized that while she had always prided herself on creating a welcoming space, she had unconsciously catered to a specific demographic. The art on the walls, the music playing in the background, even the names of some of her specialty drinks, all reflected a narrow cultural perspective. One afternoon, as Linda was cleaning up after the lunch rush, she overheard a conversation between two customers. They were discussing the incident, unaware that the owner was nearby. "I can't believe this was happening right under our noses," one said. "I've been coming here for years and never noticed anything off." "That's the thing about systemic racism," the other replied. "It's so ingrained that we often don't see it until something big happens to open our eyes." Their words hit Linda hard. She realized that her cafe, which she had always seen as a place of comfort and community, could also be a space of exclusion and division. The thought was painful, but it also sparked a determination in her to do better. That evening, Linda sat in her empty cafe, looking around with new eyes. She thought about Angela and Malik, about the speakers at the town hall, about all the customers who might have felt unwelcome without her ever realizing it. She thought about the responsibility she held as a business owner in the community. For the first time since the incident, Linda felt a glimmer of hope. She couldn't change what had happened, but she could use this experience as a catalyst for transformation, both for herself and for her beloved cafe. With a deep breath, she opened her laptop and began to research diversity and inclusion practices for small businesses, determined to turn her cafe into a truly welcoming space for all. The community center buzzed with activity as Angela and her newly formed group of mothers put the finishing touches on their event. Colorful posters adorned the walls, each bearing messages of unity and equality. Tables were set up with informational pamphlets and sign-up sheets for future meetings. Angela stood at the entrance, greeting arrivals with a warm smile and a name tag. As the room filled with families from diverse backgrounds, Angela felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was their first major event, aimed at bringing the community together to discuss the impact of racism on children and families. She scanned the crowd, recognizing faces from social media and previous online meetings. Unbeknownst to Angela, Linda had slipped into the event, choosing a seat near the back of the room. She had debated whether to attend, fearing she might not be welcome. But David, her mentor in this journey of self-reflection, had encouraged her to go, emphasizing the importance of listening and learning. The event began with a panel discussion. Angela and 3 other mothers shared their experiences, speaking candidly about the challenges they faced and the fears they harbored for their children. As they spoke, Linda listened intently, her eyes widening at stories of discrimination that she had never considered before. After the panel, attendees broke into smaller discussion groups. Linda hesitated, then joined a nearby circle. The facilitator, a woman named Gabrielle, asked each person to share a time when they had witnessed or experienced discrimination. As others in the group shared their stories, Linda felt increasingly uncomfortable. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath. I'm actually the cafe owner from the incident that sparked all this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The group fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Linda braced herself for anger or rejection, but Gabrielle simply nodded. "Thank you for being here," she said. "Would you like to share what you've learned from that experience?" Encouraged by Gabrielle's response, Linda opened up. She spoke about her initial defensiveness, her conversations with David, and the painful process of recognizing her own biases. "I'm here because I want to do better," she concluded. I want to understand and be part of the solution." The group's reaction was mixed. Some nodded appreciatively at her honesty, while others remained skeptical. One man, his voice tight with emotion, shared how Linda's actions had affected his daughter, who had been at the cafe that day and witnessed the incident. As Linda listened to the impact of her actions ripple through the community, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. The abstract concepts of racism and privilege she had been grappling with suddenly became very real and personal. Meanwhile, Angela had been moving between groups, listening and offering support. When she approached Linda's circle and realized who was there, she paused, surprised. Their eyes met across the circle, a moment of tension hanging between them. Gabriel, sensing the shift in energy, invited Angela to join their discussion. As Angela sat down, Linda felt her heart racing. This was the first time they had been face to face since the incident at the cafe. "I want to apologize," Linda began, her voice shaky but determined. "What I did was wrong, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you and your son." Angela listened silently, her expression unreadable. When Linda finished, Angela took a moment before responding. "I appreciate your apology," she said carefully, "but you need to understand that this isn't just about one incident. It's about a lifetime of experiences, of always being on guard, of having to teach my son how to navigate a world that often sees him as a threat before seeing him as a child." Linda nodded, fighting back tears. "I understand," she said. "Or at least, I'm trying to. I know I have a lot more to learn." As the event drew to a close, Angela took the stage once more. She thanked everyone for attending and emphasized that this was just the beginning of an ongoing conversation. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said, "but it does happen, one conversation, one action, one person at a time." Linda lingered as the crowd dispersed, watching as Angela was surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. She felt a mixture of admiration for Angela's strength and leadership, and a renewed determination to be part of the change in their community. As she left the community center, Linda knew that her journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt like she was on the right path. In the days following the community event, Angela found herself reflecting on her interaction with Linda. While part of her was still hurt by the incident at the cafe, she couldn't deny the sincerity in Linda's apology. Angela's phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Linda requesting a meeting to discuss how they could move forward. After some hesitation, Angela agreed. They met at a neutral location, a small park near the community center. As they sat on a bench, an awkward silence hung between them. Linda spoke first, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Angela, I want you to know that I'm committed to making real changes, not just in my cafe, but in myself. I know my apology at the event wasn't enough, and it shouldn't be. I want to do more." Angela nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate that, Linda. But you need to understand that forgiveness and reconciliation are processes. They take time, and more importantly, they require action." "I understand," Linda replied. "I've been thinking about concrete steps I can take. I'm planning to implement diversity and inclusion training for all my staff. I'm also looking into partnering with local minority-owned businesses for our supplies. But I want to do more, and I could use your guidance." Angela considered Linda's words carefully. While she was impressed by Linda's initiatives, she also recognized the weight of responsibility that came with being asked for guidance. "Linda, it's not the job of those who have been wronged to educate those who have wronged them. However, I can see you're genuinely trying to change. I'll consider working with you, but you need to understand that this journey is yours to make." As their conversation continued, they began to outline a plan for moving forward. Linda committed to regular check-ins with Angela and her group to ensure she was making progress and staying accountable. They also discussed the possibility of using the cafe as a meeting space for community dialogues on race and equality. Meanwhile, Linda wasted no time in implementing changes at her cafe. She hired a diversity consultant to conduct training sessions for her staff, focusing on recognizing and addressing unconscious biases. The sessions were eye-opening for many of her employees, leading to difficult but necessary conversations. Linda also revamped the cafe's decor and menu. She reached out to local artists from diverse backgrounds to display their work on the walls. The menu now featured a wider range of cultural influences, with Linda taking care to properly credit and honor the origins of each dish. As word of these changes spread, the community's response was mixed. Many applauded Linda's efforts, seeing them as a step in the right direction. Others remained skeptical, viewing the changes as too little, too late. Linda faced criticism from some of her longtime customers who felt uncomfortable with the new direction of the cafe. Despite the challenges, she remained committed to her path. Angela, true to her word, continued her activism. She organized peaceful protests against systemic racism, focusing on issues like police brutality and educational inequality. Malik, observing his mother's determination, began to show interest in her work. Angela carefully involved him in age-appropriate ways, using the experience as teachable moments about standing up for what's right. During one of their protests, Angela was surprised to see Linda among the participants. Linda stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, holding a sign that read, "Listening and Learning." When their eyes met, Linda gave a small nod of solidarity, which Angela returned. As weeks turned into months, both women found themselves transformed by their experiences. Angela had become a respected voice in the community, her group growing into a formal organization dedicated to promoting equality and justice. She balanced her activism with her work and parenting, finding strength in the community she had helped build. Linda's cafe had evolved into a hub for community engagement. Regular discussion groups met there, tackling tough topics in a space designed to foster understanding. While she still faced challenges and made mistakes, Linda remained committed to the ongoing work of creating an inclusive environment. The journey of reconciliation between Angela and Linda was far from over. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But with each small step, each conversation, each action, each moment of understanding, they moved closer to a genuine resolution. Their story became a testament to the power of accountability, the importance of listening, and the possibility of change, even in the face of deeply rooted societal issues. As summer turned to fall, the atmosphere in the city remained charged. Despite the progress made by individuals like Linda and the awareness raised by Angela's group, tensions in the community continued to simmer. The incident at the cafe had become a catalyst for broader discussions about systemic racism, and not everyone was comfortable with these conversations. One crisp morning, Linda arrived at her cafe to find a small group of protesters outside. They held signs with slogans like, "Stop the PC culture," and "Support local businesses, not social justice." Linda's heart sank as she realized these were some of her former regular customers, upset with the changes she had implemented. As Linda unlocked the door, one of the protesters approached her. "Linda, we've been coming here for years. Why are you letting these people bully you into changing everything?" the woman asked, her voice a mix of anger and confusion. Linda took a deep breath before responding. "I'm not being bullied, Sarah. I'm learning and growing. The changes I've made are because I believe they're right, not because anyone forced me." Inside the cafe, Linda's staff watched the scene unfold with concern. Some of the newer employees hired as part of Linda's diversity initiative looked particularly uncomfortable. Linda reassured her team and asked them to carry on with their duties as usual. As the day progressed, the protest outside grew. Local news vans arrived and reporters began asking for interviews. Linda found herself torn between defending her choices and not wanting to escalate the situation. Across town, Angela was in a meeting with her activist group when she received a text about the protest. Without hesitation, she decided to go to the cafe. "This isn't just about Linda anymore," she told her colleagues. "This is about standing up for the changes we've been fighting for." When Angela arrived at the cafe, the scene had become more heated. Counter-protesters had shown up, leading to shouting matches on the sidewalk. Police officers were present, trying to maintain order. Angela spotted Linda through the cafe window, looking overwhelmed as she spoke to a reporter. Making her way through the crowd, Angela entered the cafe and approached Linda. "I thought you might need some support," Angela said, surprising herself with the protective feeling she felt towards the woman who had once discriminated against her. Linda looked at Angela with gratitude. "I didn't expect it to get this big," she admitted. "I'm not sure what to do." Angela nodded understandingly. "Let's face this together," she suggested. "We can use this moment to have the conversation our community needs." With Angela's encouragement, Linda decided to address the crowd. They stepped outside, the noise dimming as people noticed them standing together. Linda spoke first, her voice shaky but gaining strength. "I know the changes I've made have been difficult for some of you to accept, but they come from a place of genuine growth and understanding. This cafe has always been about community, and now we're striving to make it a community that truly includes everyone." Angela then took the microphone. "Change is never easy," she began, "but it's necessary. What's happening here today is a reflection of the larger issues our society is grappling with. We have a choice. We can resist this change and remain divided, or we can embrace it and work towards a more equitable community for all of us." Their words had a visible impact on the crowd. While not everyone was immediately convinced, the tone of the gathering shifted. Some protesters lowered their signs, engaging in conversations with those on the other side. Seeing an opportunity, Linda made a spontaneous decision. "I'm opening the cafe to anyone who wants to come in and have a real conversation about these issues," she announced. "Free coffee for everyone who's willing to sit down with someone they disagree with." The offer broke the tension. Gradually, people began to file into the cafe, filling the tables. Linda, Angela, and the staff worked together to facilitate discussions, ensuring that every table had a mix of perspectives. As the day wore on, the crowd outside dwindled, with more people choosing to come inside and talk. The cafe buzzed with intense but largely respectful conversations. Linda moved from table to table, listening more than speaking, continuing her own education. By closing time, the atmosphere had transformed. While not all disagreements were resolved, many people left with a better understanding of different perspectives. Some even exchanged contact information, promising to continue their discussions. As Linda and Angela stood side by side, watching the last of the crowd disperse, they shared a moment of quiet triumph. What had started as a protest had turned into an impromptu community dialogue, a small but significant step towards healing the divisions in their city. "Thank you for being here today," Linda said to Angela. "I couldn't have handled this alone," Angela smiled, a mix of exhaustion and hope on her face. "This is what real change looks like," she replied. "It's messy and uncomfortable, but it's necessary, and it's clear we're stronger when we face it together." As they locked up the cafe, both women knew that this day marked a turning point. The path ahead was still long and challenging, but they had shown their community a way forward, through open dialogue, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to progress. In the wake of the protest-turned dialogue at the cafe, Linda and Angela found themselves at the center of local attention. Their impromptu handling of the situation had sparked interest from various community leaders and organizations. Recognizing the potential for broader impact, they decided to capitalize on this momentum. Linda reached out to Angela with an idea. "What if we formalize what happened that day?" she proposed. "We could organize a structured community dialogue event right here in the cafe." Angela considered the suggestion. "It's a good idea, but we need to ensure it's done right. We can't just have people talking at each other. We need to create a space for real understanding and actionable outcomes." They spent the next few weeks meticulously planning the event. They enlisted the help of professional facilitators, created ground rules for respectful dialogue, and carefully curated a diverse group of participants representing various perspectives within the community. On the day of the event, the cafe was transformed. Tables were arranged in a large circle with smaller breakout areas set up for more intimate discussions. As people began to arrive, there was a palpable mix of anticipation and nervousness in the air. Linda greeted attendees at the door, her usual smile tinged with anxiety. She had come a long way since the incident with Angela, but hosting this event felt like her biggest test yet. Angela stood nearby, clipboard in hand, directing people to their assigned seats. The event began with an opening speech from a respected local civil rights leader, setting the tone for the day. "We're not here to point fingers or assign blame," she emphasized. "We're here to listen, to understand, and to find a path forward together." As the discussions began, it became clear that the wounds in the community ran deep. Long-standing grievances and misunderstandings came to the surface. There were moments of tension, raised voices, and even tears. During one particularly heated exchange, Linda found herself mediating between a young activist and an older business owner. The activist was passionately arguing for more aggressive measures to combat systemic racism, while the business owner expressed fears about the economic impact of rapid change. Linda listened to both sides, then spoke. "A few months ago, I might have agreed with the fears being expressed about change," she admitted. "But I've learned that the cost of not changing, of not addressing these issues, is far greater. It's not just about business, it's about the kind of community we want to be." Her words seemed to resonate, leading to a more nuanced discussion about balancing progress with practical considerations. Meanwhile, Angela was engaged in a powerful conversation with a small group, sharing her experiences as a Black mother. As she spoke about her fears for Malik's future, she noticed a white mother in the group becoming emotional. "I've never had to think about these things," the woman confessed, her voice shaky. "I'm realizing how much I've taken for granted and how much I need to learn to be a better ally." This moment of vulnerability opened up a deeper dialogue about privilege and parenting in a racially divided society. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the cafe evolved. The initial awkwardness gave way to more open and honest exchanges. People who had entered as strangers found common ground, while those with opposing views began to see the humanity in each other's perspectives. Towards the end of the event, Linda and Angela brought everyone back together to share insights and commitments. The facilitators had compiled key points and action items from each discussion group. One by one, people stood to share their takeaways. A local teacher committed to revamping her curriculum to include more diverse perspectives. A police officer spoke about the need for better community engagement and bias training. A business leader proposed a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs of color. As Linda listened to these commitments, she felt a sense of awe at what they had accomplished. This event, born out of a painful incident in her cafe, had become a catalyst for real change in their community. The final speaker was Angela. She stood looking around the room with a mix of emotion. "When I walked into this cafe months ago, I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she began. "What happened to me was painful, but it led to this moment. It showed us that change is possible, that hard conversations can lead to understanding, and that our community has the power to come together and address the issues that divide us." As the event concluded, people lingered, exchanging contact information and making plans to continue their conversations. Linda and Angela found themselves side by side once again, watching the scene with a shared sense of accomplishment. "We did it," Linda said softly. Angela nodded, a tired but satisfied smile on her face. "This is just the beginning," she replied. "But it's a good beginning." As the last of the attendees left, Linda and Angela sat down at a table, exhausted but exhilarated. They knew that one event couldn't solve all the problems in their community, but it had created a foundation for ongoing dialogue and action. In the quiet of the now empty cafe, they began to plan their next steps, committed to building on the momentum they had created. In the weeks following the successful community dialogue event, Linda's cafe had become a symbol of positive change in the community. The local press ran features on the transformation, and Linda found herself fielding inquiries from other business owners about implementing similar initiatives. One quiet afternoon, as Linda was reviewing the cafe's finances, she received an unexpected email. The sender claimed to be a former employee named Mark, who had been fired a year ago. The email was brief but unsettling. "I saw what you did to that woman and her kid. Don't think your little PR stunt makes up for who you really are. The truth will come out." Linda's hands shook as she read the message. She vaguely remembered Mark. He had been let go due to repeated customer complaints about his rude behavior, particularly towards minority patrons. At the time, Linda had chalked it up to poor customer service skills, not considering the racial implications. As she pondered how to respond, Linda's phone buzzed with a notification. Her heart sank as she saw a new post circulating on social media. It was the video of her confrontation with Angela, but this version was edited to include comments she didn't remember making, painting her in an even worse light than the original. The post was gaining traction quickly, with angry comments flooding in. People were calling for boycotts of the cafe and questioning the sincerity of Linda's recent actions. Some even accused her of orchestrating the entire reconciliation with Angela as a publicity stunt. Panicked, Linda called Angela. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone's trying to undo everything we've worked for." Angela listened calmly as Linda explained the situation. "Take a deep breath," she advised. "We'll face this together." "But Linda, is there any truth to what this person is saying? Is there anything in your past we need to address?" Linda paused, reflecting on her past behavior. I'm not sure," she admitted. "I never thought of myself as racist, but I'm realizing I might have overlooked things, especially with employees. I fired Mark for poor customer service, but now I wonder if I missed signs of something deeper." Angela sighed. "This is part of the process, Linda. We all have blind spots. What matters is how we address them now. Let's meet and figure out a strategy." They convened an emergency meeting with their core group of community leaders. As they discussed the situation, it became clear that this attack was not just on Linda, but on the progress the entire community had made. "We need to get ahead of this," one of the leaders suggested. "Be transparent about the past and focus on the changes we're making." Linda nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "I'll make a public statement," she decided. "I'll acknowledge my past mistakes, including any oversight in handling employee issues. But I'll also reaffirm my commitment to change." As they worked on crafting the statement, more posts appeared online. Mark had started sharing stories from his time working at the cafe, some true, some exaggerated, and some completely fabricated. He painted a picture of a toxic work environment where casual racism was the norm. The situation escalated when Mark announced he would be holding a press conference to expose the truth about Linda and the cafe. Local news outlets, hungry for controversy, eagerly promoted the upcoming event. Linda and Angela worked tirelessly to prepare. They reached out to current and former employees who could speak to the positive changes in the cafe. They gathered documentation of the diversity training, community events, and policy changes that had been implemented. On the day of Mark's press conference, Linda and Angela decided to face the situation head-on. They showed up at the event, surprising Mark and the assembled reporters. Mark began his speech, recounting tales of discrimination and unfair treatment. But as he spoke, Linda stepped forward. "I won't deny that mistakes were made in the past," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I had blind spots and I may have overlooked issues that I should have addressed. For that I am deeply sorry, but I stand here today as someone committed to learning, growing, and actively working to combat racism in our community." Angela then took the microphone. "I was the woman in that video," she announced, causing a stir among the reporters. "What happened to me was real and painful. But what's also real is the work that Linda and this community have done since then. We're not claiming perfection, but we are committed to progress." Their united front and honest acknowledgement of past failures while emphasizing ongoing efforts for change caught Mark off guard. The narrative he had hoped to push, of Linda as an unrepentant racist, began to crumble in the face of their transparency and commitment to improvement. As the press conference ended, Linda and Angela found themselves surrounded by reporters asking for more details about their journey and the community's efforts. What Mark had intended as an attack had instead become an opportunity to showcase the real, messy, ongoing work of addressing systemic racism. Later that evening, as they debriefed in the cafe, Linda turned to Angela. "Thank you for standing by me," she said softly. "I couldn't have faced this alone." Angela nodded, her expression serious. "This is what allyship looks like," she replied. "It's not just about the easy times, but about standing together when things get tough. We've come too far to let someone drag us backwards now." As they looked around the cafe, at the diverse group of people who had gathered to support them, both women felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had weathered this storm together, and in doing so had shown their community the power of unity in the face of adversity. In the aftermath of Mark's failed attempt to discredit Linda and the community's progress, the cafe became busier than ever. People from all over the city came to show their support and witness firsthand the changes that had been implemented. However, this increased attention brought new challenges. One evening, as Linda was closing up, she noticed a flyer taped to the cafe's window. It advertised a Unity Festival to be held in the park across from the cafe, organized by Angela's group. Linda smiled, appreciating how far they'd come. But as she read further, her smile faded. The flyer mentioned a fundraising goal of $50,000 for community programs, and Linda realized she hadn't been consulted about this event happening so close to her business. The next day, Linda reached out to Angela. "I saw the flyer for the Unity Festival. It looks great, but I wish you had talked to me about it first. I want to support this, but I'm worried about how it might affect the cafe." Angela was surprised by Linda's concern. "I thought you'd be excited about this. It's a chance to showcase everything we've been working towards." Their conversation became tense, old insecurities bubbling to the surface. Linda felt sidelined in a movement she had become deeply invested in, while Angela felt that Linda was prioritizing her business over their cause. As preparations for the festival continued, the rift between them grew. Linda's fears seemed to be coming true as some of her regular customers complained about the upcoming event, worried about noise and crowds. Meanwhile, Angela faced criticism from some members of her group who felt she was being too accommodating to Linda's concerns. The situation came to a head a week before the festival. Mark, still smarting from his failed press conference, saw an opportunity to cause more trouble. He began spreading rumors online that the festival was a front for embezzling money from the community. He specifically targeted Angela, accusing her of using the movement for personal gain. These accusations quickly gained traction, fueled by existing tensions in the community. Some local businesses, already wary of the changes brought about by Linda and Angela's efforts, seized on these rumors to oppose the festival. Linda was torn. Part of her wanted to distance herself from the controversy to protect her cafe. But as she watched Angela struggle to defend herself and the festival, Linda realized she had a choice to make. She could prioritize her immediate business interests, or she could stand by the principles she had come to believe in over the past months. After a sleepless night, Linda made her decision. She called Angela early the next morning. "I'm sorry," she began. "I let my fears get the better of me. This festival isn't just your project. It's ours. It's the community's, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it a success." Relieved and touched by Linda's support, Angela opened up about her own doubts and fears. Together, they formulated a plan to address Mark's accusations head-on and rally the community behind the festival. Linda offered to host a public meeting at the cafe to discuss the festival's finances and goals transparently. She reached out to her business contacts, securing donations and support from local enterprises. Angela worked with her group to create detailed budgets and plans for the festival funds, making all information publicly available. On the day of the meeting, the cafe was packed. Linda and Angela stood side by side, presenting their vision for the festival and addressing concerns from the community. They emphasized that this event was not just about raising money, but about bringing people together and showcasing the positive changes in their neighborhood. As they opened the floor for questions, Mark burst in, camera in hand, ready to cause a scene. But before he could speak, several community members stood up, voicing their support for Linda and Angela's efforts. They shared personal stories of how the recent changes had positively impacted their lives and expressed excitement for the upcoming festival. Faced with this united front, Mark's accusations fell flat. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of enthusiasm for the festival, and Mark left, realizing his attempts to divide the community had ultimately brought them closer together. The Unity Festival itself was a resounding success. The park was filled with people from all walks of life, enjoying music, food, and meaningful conversations. Linda's Cafe served as a central hub, offering free coffee and hosting small discussion groups throughout the day. As the sun began to set, Linda and Angela found a quiet moment amidst the festivities. They watched as Malik played with a diverse group of children, their laughter rising above the crowd. "We did it," Angela said softly, echoing Linda's words from months ago. Linda nodded, a contented smile on her face. "No, we're doing it. This isn't an end point. It's a new beginning." They looked out at the crowd, recognizing how far they'd come from that fateful day in the cafe. The journey hadn't been easy, and they knew there would be more challenges ahead. But they had built something powerful, a community united in its commitment to understanding, growth, and genuine change. As they rejoined the festival, both women felt a deep sense of hope. They had transformed a moment of conflict into a movement of reconciliation, proving that with perseverance, empathy, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, real change was possible. Their story, born from a single incident in a small cafe, had blossomed into a testament to the power of human connection and the endless potential for growth and understanding.